Just click up a button. Okay. Perfect. Now I'm going to share my screen. Okay. Awesome. Okay. Okay, I think everybody's here. Can everybody hear me okay too? Okay. So I'm Samantha Springer. I'm the executive director here at the Kenai Chamber, if I haven't met you yet already. Today we're going to be talking about conflict resolution and mediation skills. Not always a fun topic, but I think it's a skill that people should work on. It's really easy to have issues in the workplace with different personalities and such. So this is a pretty hefty deck. I will provide it so you don't have to take a ton of notes, just because there's a lot of definitions and verbiage and tips and tricks and everything else. So, and at any time you can ask a question. So, and I'll probably ask you guys questions too. So what we're going to talk about, actually, can you dim the lights too? What is conflict? Anybody? Like what do you think of when you think of conflict? Just throw out. Huh?
Disagreement.
Okay. Okay. I mean, I can give you the verb and nouns. It's pretty much exactly what you would think it is, you know, things that a quarrel, something that's off, right? So we're going to talk about the importance of fixing conflict, especially in the workplace, because the last thing, especially if you have a small team, the last thing you want is people who don't get along to continue to not get along. It affects a lot of things, which we're also going to talk about. And if at any time you can't hear me, let me know. Just getting over a cold. So, understanding conflict and the common sources of conflict in business. I bet a lot of people would already know some of these, so we'll just go through them pretty quick. Communication breakdowns. Obviously, people either aren't communicating how someone else likes to communicate. Sometimes there's even over communication, which comes off as micromanaging from a coworker. That can be an issue. There's lots of ways where communication can break down. Different goals. You may not have the same ideas or goals as someone else that you're working with. You might intend to be moving up in the company. They might intend to be in their position forever. And sometimes that can cause some issues as well. Personality clashes, probably the most common. Not everyone is going to like you, and not everyone is going to be liked. So it's how to work past that. And, you know, you probably spend a lot of time with your coworkers more than your family sometimes. So if there's personality clashes there, it's going to affect everybody, literally everybody in the office. Even if you don't notice it, you might be the problem. Okay. We'll get into that. So what are the effects of unresolved conflict? Anybody?
Bitterness.
We throw things. I'm just kidding. I've never actually had anyone do that, but my inappropriate reaction would probably be to laugh. I'd be like, okay, clean that up. But impact on productivity. Obviously, if people are not happy at work, their work production goes down, right? Negative effects on team dynamics and morale. Again, these are all things that happen when there's conflict in the workplace. Increased turnover. This is huge. It's huge for a company too. If you start seeing a position that works with another position constantly turning over, that's probably something as a manager or as another employee who's witnessing it to probably say something, because obviously something is wrong in that. Like it's not the person who keeps leaving. There's something going on in that area that needs to be resolved. And then, yeah, when people aren't talking or aren't around each other, that's also a weird thing too. So if everyone's in the office together and one person comes around and everyone becomes quiet, these are all things that you should be watching for, either as an employer or as an employee, to help. It doesn't mean you have to go tattle if you feel it, but it might be something where maybe you can help resolve, And if you can't, then, and it is affecting everything in the atmosphere, then you probably should talk to a manager or someone that you trust, HR, if you have an HR. Resentment and hostility, like flipping desks. But the resentment thing is a big deal, and that turns into the turnover, right? So these are all things that if you allow that conflict to stay there, you're going to have these effects. It's bound to happen. It might not happen instantly, but it will happen eventually. So again, some of these, I just put a lot of information on there, but we're going to talk about how these can be approached. And we're going to talk about them as far as how they can be approached as individuals or managers. And then we're going to also talk about mediation. And I feel like mediation is where we have to go when you cannot resolve it on your own. I think mediation should be the last step unless you're that uncomfortable that you don't think that anything can be resolved without it. Because mediation can also cause, again, like a resentment, like they feel like they're being attacked. It just kind of depends. And so we're going to go over all this stuff and kind of talk about all the strategies and all the ways that you can get through conflict and come out on the other side, and also understand how your coworkers, your boss, your employees, how they want to be talked to as well. Because I don't know how often you go into a new job and you let your boss know how you like to be talked to. Like, I don't like to be micromanaged. I chose a job where I don't really have a boss. So I have a board of directors. And as long as I prove that I can do my job, they leave me alone. So that's an ideal career for me because of the simple fact that I can be managed. I just don't like to be, right? But I've gone into other jobs where I have told my manager that. And they've been fine with it as long as there was results. But basically, if I don't agree with you, I'm going to tell you I don't agree with you. And I will tell you how I'm going to do my job and how it will work. And then, but you're like, that's a lot of communication. And you have to be comfortable explaining that. And not all managers are going to be like, cool, do whatever you want. But again, that's how we are working to get to a common goal. So types of ways to work these things out. Competitive, I call this a win-lose situation. So this is kind of an assertive approach where it's usually a boss talking to an employee. And it's kind of just an assertive, like, this is how we're going to do it. And that's it. There's pros and cons to this situation. Obviously, you're presenting that you are the hierarchy in the situation, which I feel like you should only do this in an employee and boss situation. Like, I don't think you should do this to a coworker. I think that would go poorly. But again, over time, you can create resentment from this because your employee might not feel heard at that point. Basically, it's my way or no way, right? Collaborative, win-win. This won't always work because, again, sometimes there's going to be someone above that controls what's going on below. But again, it's kind of, finding those solutions that involve an effort from all parties involved and not just one over the other. So again, though, and then we're going to go over all these things like active listening, problem solving, stuff like that. But it is more of a win-win. If you can work in that dynamic, it's a really good way to go. So, just like, again, I'm going to give you these slide decks because there's so much information. And I was trying not to go 19 minutes like I did for public speaking, but I'm also not trying to go an hour and a half. So if I go a little fast, just know you'll have all this. So yeah, that's that. And then compromising. So again, this can be good or bad because compromising isn't necessarily collaborative, right? Compromising might be just giving in because you don't want to deal with the situation anymore, which can also lead to resentment. So there's lots of pros to, all of these have pros and cons, right? But does it fix the underlying issue? Avoiding, this one is the worst, I think. You could just avoid everything that's happening. And that's when you lead to turnover. That's when you lead to more issues. I don't recommend avoiding the problem. I think that you should face the problem head on. But again, that's my personality. My staff knows that if I have an issue, I will tell them in a respectful way, but I'm like, I feel like we could be doing this better. And then I will give them a chance to respond as well, too. Like, well, this is what we've done in the past. Worst thing you could ever say to me, but this is what we've done in the past. And I'll be like, okay, well, how can we improve? So you can have the hierarchy, but still have the collaborative focus. But with avoiding, you're not going to get anything fixed. Accommodating. This one also, I think, is not great. So again, you're not fixing anything. These are all like Band-Aids, right? Avoiding, accommodating. Again, not recommended, but they're all techniques. So that's why we're addressing them. Yeah, again, if you're trying to preserve relationships, accommodating can be good if you're dealing with another business sometimes. You might be like, okay, we'll let you do it this time, just because you don't want to completely break ties with another business, right? And that's what they've done in the past, and you're trying to help. But another thing with this is set boundaries. So if you are doing that with another business per se, be like, you know what, we can accommodate you this time, but in the future, this is how we do things. So set yourself up for success, not to continue in these spirals of issues. Yeah, resentment, exploitation. That sounds horrible, but it's true. Effective communication. So again, everything, and a lot of these slides are going to have some repetitive themes, because I think all of this leads back to communication. It leads back to being able to speak your mind, tell people how you're feeling, be able to receive that information. And even if you can't receive it well the time that you get it, maybe reflect on it and then revisit. So obviously, that's the importance of it, right? Is that you want to resolve things. Obviously, if you're here, you may be dealing with that, or you may have dealt with it, and you wanted to find some strategies to get away from that. Active listening skills. We're going to go over that in a lot of detail, actually. And also assertive communication techniques. And this is where my slides get pretty, wordy. So we're going to dive into those. What is active listening? What else?
Total focus on what they're saying and not thinking about what you're going to say.
That's a really good one. So it is fully concentrating, understanding, and being present, not just waiting for your turn. Because a lot of people are just waiting to, get to their point, right? But are you doing the other person justice? And are you going to expect them to be active listening when you didn't do that? It's really important. And again, you have to have empathy in this too, because you want to treat people the way you want to be treated, and you want people to listen to you. So obviously you have to give that same respect. So strategies for active listening. Paraphrasing. So, if I was saying something to you and I asked you, well, what did I just talk about? You should be able to tell me in some way. Now, if you're not listening, then you probably wouldn't be able to do that, right? If you're already on your thought, you might not be able to go back and tell me what I just went on about for 16 minutes, right? So what I'm hearing is you feel frustrated, right? Like, you should be able to kind of validate someone else's feelings. And I'm sorry, but anytime someone has done that to me when I was talking to a manager or explaining something, and they were able to express back to me what I said, but in their own language, it actually does make me feel validated, that they actually gave a crap about what I was saying. Asking clarifying questions. So if you don't understand, you can stop and be like, I get that you're frustrated. I don't understand why. Can you clarify that? Like, because then again, you're engaging in the conversation. You're not waiting for your turn, but you are asking them to be more specific on what is bothering them. Can you help me understand? Blah, 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 blah. Again, this is a big one, nonverbal cues. If I'm talking to you and I'm just on my phone, like, you wouldn't want to listen to me. So, and the same thing, if I'm talking to Michelle and she's on her phone, this drives me nuts at home. I'll be talking to my husband and I'm like, hey, I'm talking to you. And he's like, what? He's not paying any attention. He has no idea when soccer practice is. That's literally what we're talking about. Give me some eye contact just for a minute. It's not like I'm asking for a day, but like you have to show there's some interest in what the person is saying. Otherwise, you don't feel like you're being received in any way, shape, or form. Reflective listening. So this can be good and bad. This can also look sarcastic. So be careful with this one. It is a good thing to, like, so if someone's talking to you seriously and you're grinning, it's probably not a good idea. Like you're gonna make someone angry. But if you're also over empathetic, that can also be an issue because then it looks like you're mocking. So I put this in there because I think it is important to kind of judge the situation, but don't go overboard in either direction because again, it can look like either mocking or you just don't care. So, but it is, I mean, you should kind of match the mood to the conversation, which can be awkward because sometimes people, that is their reaction, is to, you know, if they're uncomfortable, they grin, or if, you know, like that's a thing that happens. So, and again, if you're that comfortable with that person, you can let them know, like, this is my face, I'm sorry, I have no poker face, you know, but you're probably not that comfortable if you're having these conversations. Unless this is your husband and you're like, and then, yeah, you're, beside just showing that, you can say it too. It sounds like you're overwhelmed with your workload right now. But again, I think that the visual is really important to talk about, like how that looks. So I'm not going to recap. I mean, you guys get what I'm putting out here with active listening for strategies, right? Does anyone have any questions about active listening off the bat? No. Now, assertive communication is different than active listening, but it also involves active listening. So this is a very large description, but it's basically advocating, but without being aggressive, passive, manipulative, but it's still definitely more of, you know, like you're telling someone exactly how you feel. I think that this is really good if you need to stand up for yourself, if you feel like you're being mistreated, misguided in any way. And especially to an employer, I feel like assertive communication in that sense is really good, which they should be providing you active listening at that point. It's kind of like a yin-yang situation here. So how to express those concerns and needs assertively? I statements. Don't generalize it. You know, you never listen to me. Don't put it, it's not about them. You're talking about how you feel. I feel frustrated when I don't feel heard, right? You're not telling them what they're doing wrong because I feel like that puts people on defensive. You're stating what is bothering you personally, okay? Be direct, be specific. I mean, and these are all like common sense things, but we don't always think about it in the moment. And you still might not. I still get super frustrated and I'll forget and I'll be like, you did this. I'm like, no, why is this bothering me? So it's nice to take that step back and be like, why does this bother me? It's not because he didn't close the door. It's because it's letting light in. It bothers me when people can't see the screen because that's just an example. The door's fine. Like, don't worry. But just don't beat around the bush. Like, be specific, especially if that's the whole point of being assertive. Maintain eye contact. Again, you'll see a lot of repetitive things. Body language, you know, are you going to stand up there and be mad? Or are you going to open yourself up and actually have a discussion? Because if you already go into it with everything crossed and your face scrunched up and you're mad, like, are you ready to have an actual conversation, or are you just going in like a charging bull ready to explode? So it goes both ways. Like, take the time to think out what you want to say so that the other person takes you seriously as well, because it matters. And then stick to the facts. Don't exaggerate. You know, you haven't closed the door 895 times in the last year. Okay, well, we've only had 2 presentations, so I don't think there could have been 895 times that it was closed. And that just makes you look silly because the other person's like, 895 times? I haven't done that 895 times. So stick to the facts. You did it twice. I was bothered by it. That's it. It is to the point. It's not negotiable at that point because you've told them how you felt. They can't justify how you feel. And they can't, if it happened 2 times and it happened 2 times, it happened 2 times. Like, there's nothing else to say on that, right? I think. Okay. Negotiation skills. I think I added extra. I made this PowerPoint on Google Slides, and it makes you add animation. This is just a side note. And if you copy a slide and you forget that you already added animation, you just keep re-adding it to the next slide. So that was probably 5 added animations for fun. Negotiation skills. So, wait, no, I was going to ask, what's the definition of negotiation? Nobody? Anyone? Nobody? Okay, we'll just move into it. Bargaining, right? That's what negotiation is. You do it at the car dealership, maybe. Some people are good at that. Some people aren't. You do it in random places, but negotiations do end up being a skill in conflict resolution and decision making. Not in all fields, but I feel like a lot of times. So there's another type of negotiation. It's called principled negotiation. So it basically focuses on the interests, not positions. It's a collaborative problem-solving technique. We'll go into it more, but it's basically something, again, that is more for all parties. It's that win-win situation rather than one over the other. So again, focused on interests, not positions. I am probably the most stubborn person that I know beside my 4-year-old. So this one's hard for me sometimes personally, but you're trying, again, to find underlying issues. You're trying to find the needs of the situation. What is causing the concern, right? So separate the people from the problem. That is really tricky sometimes, especially when you're having personality conflicts. But again, it might be how the person handles it, but is that actually the problem? So when you depersonalize something, you can usually look at it more logically. Because even if you don't necessarily like somebody, it might not be as big of a deal if it wasn't that person who's been getting under your skin, right? You're taking away that emotional tie by taking away the person. Does that make sense? Okay. So again, when you're doing this, you can generate options because, again, if you're effectively doing this, you can gain insight on why that person is wanting to do things the way they're wanting to do them. And you can learn from each other, even if you don't think there's any possibility of that, and come to some kind of beneficial agreement. And I feel like, again, it's really hard to separate the person from the problem. But again, that's why we're doing classes like this, is to talk about it and make you even think about it and see if it's something you can do. And it might not be something you can do. It doesn't mean that you're wrong. It just means that if you are at that point, that's when you move into, again, like something like mediation. These are all steps to help you before you get there. And it changed the font on this one. So effective negotiation requires a combination of skills, strategies, and techniques. So to do this, again, there's prep work. You're going to want to make sure all this is planning. This is why you can't go into things guns blazing. It's about making sure when you're going, because all this is about resolving conflict. You're not trying to create more conflict. You're trying to create a plan so that you can effectively talk to people or a group or a person, whatever's going on. Again, right back to it, active listening. You cannot solve a problem without active listening, because you're never going to give that person your full attention. Creative problem solving. So again, this is all about that brainstorming together. It's the collaborative aspect of it. You came in with a plan, they should have come in with a plan, you actively listen to each other, and then you collaborate on that plan. Effective communication, being honest, being respectful. You can take turns, however you need to do it. If you need to literally have a stick in a meeting that people hand around, that's a thing. Like, that's why there's like Robert's Rules of Order, right? To maintain it. Like, do whatever you have to do until you can get to a place where you know, everyone's getting along. But literally, if you have to have some sparkly wand stick that you hand around to people, do it. Because, or retreats. I know those sound awful if you're not getting along with people, but sometimes it's the best thing you can do, is throw people into a situation where they can't leave. Seriously. I have been on so many retreats that I did not want to go on, and I left with friends that I still didn't want to go on vacations with again. But you leave with people that you can talk to, because you don't see them in the same light when you're forced into a situation where you actually have to interact with them. And because a lot of people, you already have a mindset of how you feel about that person, right? It's hard to step away from that until you have to, until you're forced to. So, and again, there you go, building relationships. That's the end goal of this, especially if they're your coworkers, especially if they're people you have to work with on a daily basis, a monthly basis. You want to build those, because you don't want to, every time that phone rings and you see that person, you go, oh, Susan's calling again. And you just dread it. Nobody wants to feel like that at work. I don't. Mediation. Oh, I didn't even see it in this one. Didn't even clicky. You get to skip right to the definition. So mediation should be voluntary, but I know it can be forced. Forced work fun. But basically, you have to go through a third party. So things have gotten so bad that you cannot work through it. We have gone through lots of different ways where, oh, I do not have time. Good. 30 minutes. Where you've tried everything you possibly can. You have gone through your listening, you've been assertive, you've gone through negotiating, you are starting to avoid. In comes mediation, in comes a mediator, someone who has to be completely neutral. And sometimes that's someone you have to hire to be completely neutral, because it has gotten that bad. And the role of that mediator is to make sure that they're not taking sides. They're like a therapist, basically. You're in a marriage counseling session, and they have to be completely neutral to the situation. Okay, this should be the last option for you, honestly. So, principles of mediation. You have to be neutral. They have to avoid taking sides. If you were in a mediation session and the mediator starts taking sides, you have picked the wrong mediator, and it should be ended immediately, because then it feels like an attack on somebody. So it should always be someone completely biased. It should not necessarily even be someone in your organization, unless it's an HR director or person. And if your HR person is not indifferent, you can request that there be someone else, because your employer needs to provide you with a safe workspace. And I have worked at places where the HR was actually worse than anyone else you dealt with. So, but you have that right to say, I don't feel like this can be resolved. We need a neutral third party, or you're going to have turnover. If they won't provide that to you, you probably don't want to work there anyway, honestly. I don't know if I should say that, but yeah. Confidentiality. That person, beside being neutral, also has to be completely confidential about what they hear in that room, which means you might have to have them sign a waiver, because you're probably going to be dealing with sensitive subjects at work. You're probably going to be dealing with financial stuff, possibly. Like, there's lots of things. Nobody wants their office drama to get out into the public either. You don't want to see it in the Clarion. Like, it needs to be something that's confidential. So neutral and confidential is really important. And it should be voluntary. I say should, because you might not feel like you're voluntarily, especially if you're the problem. Again, sorry if anyone is the problem, but you might not feel like you're the problem and you don't need mediation, but you probably do if it's gotten to that point. And especially if you're the only one who doesn't think that mediation is necessary. Might be the biggest problem. But you can also walk out at any time. It's not like you're in an interrogation room and you're under arrest. Like if it's not working, it's not working. So the process is there's an introduction of the mediator, introduction of the parties, and then you set ground rules. So obviously, again, if we're going to be using a talking stick, if somebody doesn't have it, and the mediator will be the one who holds on to it, and they'll be like, okay, Fred, it's your turn to talk. Sally, you need to stay quiet until you get the stick. And it's literally hand-holding at this point. But again, if you've gotten to this point, it's probably necessary. So it's literally what I said, just in detail. Clarifying the issues and interests. And again, you're giving everybody a chance to say what's bothering them, why this is happening, what are the interests of resolving this, because that's important. And you have to give everybody that chance without interruption, because otherwise, what was the point of even doing this if you're just going to be arguing with each other anyway? So, and again, you're going through, this is a process. So you're going to start, and then hopefully at the end, you'll have some kind of resolution. So again, generating options. This is where we're trying to come up with a compromise. We're trying to figure out what that collaborative aspect can be. We're trying to figure out how two people or more can talk to each other. So it's just, that's literally at this point all it is. And then again, at the end, you're trying to reach an agreement and a closure, but it's something that all parties have to agree to. Otherwise, there's no point in closing it. You might have to continue. Like you might not be done in one mediation session. In fact, I'd be shocked if you got to a mediation point and it didn't take you a week to get to a point where you guys can figure it out. It's almost like divorce, actually. Just thinking about that. Yeah, good example. So, again, too fast. 21 slides. Don't have conflict. That's my conclusion. But if you do, you just need to take a step back, because honestly, I feel like the biggest issue in a conflict situation is removing yourself from it before it escalates, and then figuring out how you can resolve it. Because usually it's not like conflict just happens. It's something that usually lingers until somebody breaks, right? I mean, that's true in any relationship, whether it's work, personal, anything. Toddlers. Anybody have toddlers? Yeah, they need mediation. So if it escalates, move to mediation. Always document. I don't care if you are writing Post-it notes to yourself. Always document. If it is a workplace incident, no matter what, and if your boss or HR or no one's paying attention, you write down the date, you write down the time, you wrote down what happened. It's all there. It's time-stamped. Write it down. If you can do it on a computer or an iPhone or something where you can screenshot it so it actually has a date stamp, that is great. And unfortunately, the reason we have to do that is because things have gotten so out of control with how people communicate or can't communicate that now you're literally turning into a he said, she said, or if your HR isn't helping, then you have record that you did try to do something about this before it gets out of control. Or like if you're doing your exit interview because nothing got resolved, you have documentation where you can be like, I just want to pass this on. This is all the problems that I've gone through for the last 6 months that I have tried to resolve and nothing has happened. This is for the interest of all parties. And it's just a part of life now that you should make sure you have that on your side to help you if you need it. So does anyone have questions? Like what can I know that was a lot of information. Like I said, I'm gonna make sure everyone has these slides. But it's all about talking through and kind of figuring out the best thing. Was there something I can like elaborate more on? I didn't think I'd be that fast. Anybody have questions? It might be personal too. So if it is a personal situation and you want to talk to me after, you're totally welcome. Not to put anyone on the spot. This is one of those classes where we don't actually need any volunteers to talk about what's going on at your work. So, but I am confidential. Like if you talk to me about anything, it will stay with me. So if you don't have any common questions, then I know that was really quick, but sorry. Did that help? Is there anything that I missed?
Can I add something? A long time ago, I had a bunch of people in my crew that they didn't want to work with each other or talk to each other. So I went on the internet and researched exercises for a team to work together.
Mm-hmm.
And took a meeting room like this, made a big circle, threw a bunch of big bells in it, put blindfolds where they all picked names, they all had to have teams, and they had to walk each other to a certain area in the middle of that circle to pick something up blindfolded, and they had to walk them carefully with everybody going at the same time.
Yeah.
And so they all had to focus on learning how to communicate, learning how to listen, and learning how to trust.
Yeah.
It was one of the best exercises I ever did, and they all had a blast. So that's just a suggestion. If you're having problems or conflict in the team,
Just blindfold people.
put them together and say, here, this is what we're gonna do as a team building skill.
I'm telling you, retreats,
They're
man,
fun.
every time I've ever had to go on, I was like, I do not want to do this. I do not want to go on this thing for 2 days and be with people that I have to be with all the time anyway, to talk about things I don't want to talk about. And every time I was like, that was a really good idea. There is never a time that I left it and was like, well, that was stupid. Now, there were people that left those thinking that was stupid, but they also didn't stay because they had unresolved issues that they couldn't work through because they wouldn't open themselves up. You know, and I used to be in liquor and wine for a long time. And that is a ruthless industry, by the way. People are so mean to each other. And so I think that's why I just have such thick skin, because I was finally like, I don't care if you like me or not, but I'm going to tell you exactly how it is. In fact, I tried to get kicked out of a store for an entire year because I didn't want to go there anymore. And I finally just went up to it because I was just avoiding. I was like, if I just avoid this manager, then eventually he'll be like, I never see her. Like I'll get kicked out. Well, he never kicked me out. So finally one day I walked up to him. I was like, Bruce, I know you hate me. And he's like, I don't hate you. And I'm like, no, it's fine, actually. I know you do. You won't give me any display space on the floor. You never let me bring any new items in. You avoid me. I literally have seen you run when I'm walking into the store. And he's like shocked that I'm saying this to him. And I was like, so can you just kick me out? And he was like, well, you're making me feel really bad. And I was like, I'm literally not trying to. I would just like you to have a different rep. If you don't like me to the point where you're literally running from me when I come in to sell you Jameson, like, please let me go. And he was like, well, you can have a display of Jameson over here. And I'm like, are you kidding? So all I had to do a year ago was ask you to kick me out, and then you would have given me a display? He's like, no, you're just a little aggressive. I was like, you're scared of me. Oh, I can tone that down. Like, if you just tell me how you like to be talked to, I can do that. But again, both sides, I just thought he hated me because I'm not joking. Like, I'd see him right out, and I'd be like, great. And then I have to find him. It's even more awkward when you're stalking someone in the back of a grocery store. But eventually we came to an understanding, and then he left like a month later, and the next manager was exactly like him at the same store. And I was like, perfect. This is great. So again, communication. If I had just talked to him previously, he would have been like, you scare me. If you could just bring it down a notch. I would have brought it down a little bit, but sales, it's aggressive. Anybody have any other questions? No? Okay. Well, thank you guys for coming. Yeah. And I am available via email, or if you need a mediator. But I appreciate everyone's time today. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. People online are probably like, what happened? Oh, I'm aggressive. Assertive. I'm assertive. I don't know if there's any questions online.
Yeah, I'll just mark your time to 12:45. And so, yeah, we just started at 12:45.
Of course.